Hello, my name is Brenna and I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Biology. Today I want to talk about my experience teaching a new course and implementing the practice of ungrading. The new course I designed, titled Collection Material Handling, was a cross-listed upper level and graduate course that I taught this past spring 2023. During this presentation, I will first talk through the conceptualization of this course, then show examples of the ungraded activities I implemented, and will end with the student responses. First, the conceptualization of this course was a cross-departmental discussion. I was a TA for the Natural Resource Interpretation course in the fall of 2021. Most students were on the track to do natural resource management, but most students didn't know that we had resources on campus that could help them with their conservation training. One student in particular, a senior who was interested in flora distributions along the Wasatch Mountain Range, didn't know that we had the Intermountain Herbarium on campus as a resource. Since the College of Humanities and Social Sciences has a Museum Studies certificate program, which is a 24 credit hour requirement, I discussed with one of my doctoral committee members, Dr. Molly Cannon, about creating a course that provided more hands-on experience with collection objects. After a year of discussions and designing, the Department of Anthropology approved of this course. And this is a really cool thing because courses like this with a cross-departmental museum collection integration is very rare, with not many opportunities in any higher education institution. Before deciding on a grading system, I first identified answers to 4 questions. What is the goal of the course? What specific information do students need to know? What should the students take away for a museum career? And then also, what should students take away specifically just from this course? My goal was to get students into the collections. There is no specific information that students needed to know for future courses here at USU, or even for future employment, as most information is learned at specific museums and institutions. The most important takeaways that I wanted to instill on my students were adaptability, critical thinking, and practice with communication. So I developed course objectives that were student-centered using these answers, including allowing students to explore collection resources, writing and presenting skill building, strengthening of critical and holistic thinking, and allowing for some practice in self-assessments and self-advocacy. All these things are very important in the museum world where most funds come from grants or communications directly with possible donors in the community. And the act of holistically presenting information to reach as many people as possible while also assessing the efficacy of such exhibits is a common museum practice. These ideas really can be applied to any field of study or any possible career path. Because of these objectives, I felt it most appropriate to implement the practice of ungrading. With ungrading, the focus is on the students learning a material or information and going beyond the memorization to metacognition and self-expression. Just as learning should never be a static thing, so should student engagement and assessments. I primarily use resources from these 3 books, as well as the websites by Jesse Stommel and Dr. Jessamine Niehaus, and the resources also provided by ETE to develop how I wanted to incorporate the practice of ungrading. And after exploring these resources, I decided that the best option was to have this entire class ungraded. So during the course, I had virtual and in-person discussions. The virtual discussions were short readings ranging from email exchanges, news articles, and different website explorations that are all related to that week's discussion topic. In class, I gave pause often to allow students to banter about topics from their own perspectives, bringing together everything with some lecturing and application of that lecture material through real-world problem-solving activities. In the collections, we either simply explored or helped with an activity that particular collection needed, such as assessing the ichthyology jars in the fish ecology teaching collection. Please contact me if you want to see or discuss any specifics about any of these activities, as I want to focus on how I actually implemented the ungrading for all of this. For attendance, I only recorded presence and absences for the full class without marking percentage penalties for tardiness. I set it to not count towards the final grade, but I used this to see which days were missed by students so I could then ask them specific questions about those topics during our mid and final individual student meetings. For example, I had one student missed many classes due to other campus meetings during the class period, which ended up being later in the day. So I asked them many questions from the topics that were missed. Before some, but not all, of our in-class discussions, I had students do short readings and make a virtual post via the Canvas discussion board about their thoughts or some of their questions about the topic. The posts were set up in a way that students must make a comment or a post before viewing other students' posts. I encourage them to also go back to previous posts and make new comments throughout the semester. In the grade book, I use these standard Canvas color codes to identify specific topics to also ask students during their individual meetings. So what I have here is posted on time and responded to classmates, posted late but also still responded to classmates, posted on time but did not respond to a classmate's posts, posted late and also did not respond to a classmate's post, or didn't make any initial posts. The semester project was a grant proposal implementing a backwards design like many instructors create lesson plans. I first had students explain what they hope to get or what they want the specific collection to get out of their grant proposal, then had them conceptualize how they would do that for the methods, and finally culminate it all into an introduction. I had students comment that they really appreciated that I linked all of these assignments throughout the Canvas course website and not just on a single page. So this video is just showing all the different places that they could access these assignments. To culminate all of their learning throughout the course, I had assigned them a final learning portfolio project. The students were instructed to create a portfolio detailing if they think they accomplished their personal learning objectives that we talked about at the very beginning of the course, how their thoughts and ideas about museums and collections changed from the beginning to the end of the course, and I had them provide a justification for a grade that they propose for the course. And I also initially wanted them to complete a SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis is strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats. Because of the extensive peer-to-peer conversations during every single one of our lecture times, I assigned this as an option as we didn't get a day to actually do this. A few students did the SWOT analysis on their own for each of their learning objectives, but if the course would be taught again, this and other assessment activities really should be included as full discussion days and planned out ahead of time instead of trying to tack it on to the end. Additionally, during all the discussions, I left a lot of time for the class to talk to each other about the topics of that day, which included structured activities with feedbacks, but I also used 2 additional feedback loops specific for the grant proposal that I want to highlight here in this presentation. First, each component of the grant proposal was submitted separately, and I had the students or the student group submit each of their proposals throughout the course, so not all at once. I then provided feedback for each section within the week with details about what they could do to update their sentence structures or their information, some ideas of things that they could think about including or removing, and so on. With these, I left the assignment open throughout the semester so students could continue to resubmit and I can continue to provide comments and feedback. I did have one student submit 4 times for all of their grant sections for revisions, and each time I was able to see improvements in their writing, so that was really nice to see. Second, I had a peer review exercise 2 weeks before the grant proposal was due. I took the exercise from the writing workshop book by Dr. Barbara Sarnecka, where a group simultaneously edits a written work from another student in real time via Google Docs. For this, I assigned each of the groups 3 introductions from other students' grant proposals to edit for 20 minutes each. And I also encouraged them to propose new sentence structures and organization for unclear statements instead of saying, "This is unclear." The results were much better than expected, considering that this was the first time any of them had done an activity like this, so this is something I would love to include, or continue to include. So with all of this, how did students respond to this course? Did it meet my own course objectives? And did it meet the students' expectations? As a reminder, the course objectives were to introduce students to the collections, practice writing, strengthen critical thinking skills, and practice self-assessment and self-advocacy. This course did get students into the collections where they would never have access or need to have access to, such as the entomological research collection that is not open to the public. We did a lot of practice with the process of researching a collection and editing their writing, and most students said that this was the most challenging but also rewarding part of the course. Students were also able to critically think about how words can change or sway perceptions, including what internal and external biases we all must be aware of when creating displays. And most students said that this ungrading practice really allowed them to focus on the material and not panic about assignment due dates and letter grades. Some students did want more structure than I provided in terms of the learning portfolio, where they stood within the course each week, and especially the grant proposal project. I had originally envisioned that students would be able to express their creativity with the self-design projects related to the collection, so I left the grant proposal and learning portfolio very open-ended. I could add some more structure in terms of what the grant students write for and provide more in-class peer review and editing workshops. We only had one writing and editing workshop day towards the end of the semester, and I was giving extensive feedback throughout the process, but I think getting more input from peers would be much more conducive to the project. So this also goes for spending a whole day on the SWOT analysis and additionally practicing other self-assessment activities more frequently throughout the course. With my own SWOT analysis, my concern is what will happen to this course. Dr. Molly Cannon and I are working on a proposal to get this course as a permanent offering that would be accepted as part of the exhibit object care requirement for the Museum Studies Certificate program, as well as for the newly developed Graduate Museum program. Some of the smaller things I would like to change are, again, updating the grant proposal project to fit it as a first introduction to the grant process, and have more work with self-assessment and self-advocacy. And I would definitely keep this course as an ungraded course. I want to thank everybody involved in the successful implementation of this course. Thank you, Anthropology Department, for letting me take over a museum development designation to implement this course, along with everyone at the various campus collections that allow my class to visit them and look at the items and objects. Thank you to my other committee members who have been very open to me doing these extra teaching experiences separate from my dissertation. And finally, the ETE and CE offices for helping me understand and implement the ungrading practice. Thank you for reviewing my presentation, and if you have any questions, you can send me an email. I am also close to finishing my dissertation and will be on the lookout for job opportunities within higher education with a cross-departmental focus.